So up next is, of course, the greatest magician of them all, Mani Ratnam, who truly has captured not just the Tamil consciousness and public imagination, but is one of the greatest directors that this country has seen, crosses cultures. You know, that strand has just emerged out of these three conversations, that this capacity to cross languages, to cross identities, to cross cultures, to cross aesthetics, and to forge that hybrid idea of what it means to be Indian. Mani Ratnam is certainly a master artist of that. His body of work is too vast to sum up, but all of us at Algebra have really been pursuing him to come because we wanted to get an understanding of his sensibility and his creativity. Sometimes we're not able to partake of the cinema of his Tamil body of work, but just the 5 or 6 films that he's done in Hindi has embedded itself so much in our popular imagination that he really towers above many other contemporary directors in India's mind. So today it would be fascinating to understand where his globalism comes from, how he has managed to cross so many cultures and so many aesthetics, and to create a body of work that is so uniquely his own. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mani Ratnam. I would say not thank you for accepting the invitation finally, but conceding to the invitation finally.
You wouldn't let go.
I didn't let go. Yes. Thank you, sir. So, you know, as I said, before we really enter your work, I'd be fascinated to understand how the cinema bug bit you. You know, we've had a lot of directors and actors come to Algebra, and each one has a fascinating story of how cinema grabbed them. You came from a marginally cinematic family. Your father was a film distributor, but you did a you had an MBA degree, and you mentioned that you were one of 10 children and very often not even got to see a film. So where did cinema grab you like this, and how did it enter your consciousness?
I think it was a bit of an accident. And I had grown up in a family full of, which was in the production and in the distribution of cinema, but not really in the creative side of cinema. But like I said, no, we were not allowed to watch movies. Movies is out of your syllabus, so you better stick to your studies. And you grow up like every middle class person. You know, your options are very clear and distinct, and either you're a lawyer, you're a doctor, and because I had an elder brother who was a chartered accountant, I had to go into commerce. So once I finished my post-graduation, I started working as a management consultant. And I think that was the main reason for me to move into cinema, because I was so disillusioned. It was a very early stage of consultancy, and we were producing reports which were really not required by the company or by the client. And
I told you the connecting strand in this evening is illusion.
So it was invariably for him to go to his club and say, I've got these consultants to do this job. So it was fairly disillusioning, when you come out of an institute and there's a lot of idealism left in you, and you come and do something day in and day out which is false and phony. So it kind of, that disillusionment happened at the time where I had looked at options. And cinema has been something which I've been, like every other person in India has grown up with cinema. It's just that my interest in it was a bit more than the rest of them. And, but I never thought I'd make films. I was very good at watching and following and, knowing the art of it to an extent. And so when this disillusionment happened, I thought, before I joined the next job, I'll give this a shot. I thought I'll give myself 6 months' time, and I'm still here.
Yeah. So the other thing I found very fascinating is that, so you were coming from, not from a life steeped in cinema, and then the first film that you do, you didn't go to film school. The first film that you do is in a language not of your own. You did the Kannada film, Pallavi, Anu Pallavi. What explains that? What drove that kind of courage? How do you make a film that's not in your own language? And what about that story grabbed you so much to actually make you make a film and then in a language that is not yours?
No, it was not the courage, it was desperation. If they had given me a film and said, make it in Turkish, I would have done it. You're just hungry to make a film, and you have, there's somebody who's ready to back you. And Kannada was what I got into. So, but once I got into it, I realized that it is not very different from other South Indian languages. You grammatically can move from one to another very easily. And what was more difficult was the language of cinema, which was a lot more difficult because, like you said, I didn't have training. But when you make a film, you can't go to the screen and say that this is my first film, please pardon my spellings and my grammar. So you had to make sure that there was a certain polish because every filmmaker has predominantly been a film viewer. And as a film viewer, you had several opinions, several criticisms, several views on the cinema that you've seen. So when you make a film, you should make sure that at least it lives up to what you think should be a decent cinema. So that was the main goal, or that was the main hurdle that I had to cross when I did my first film.
So, sir, you mentioned this language of cinema. Can you talk to us about what created that aesthetic in you? Because from the first films that you made, you created a very distinctive aesthetic. By and large, Tamil cinema is very larger than life, very hyperbolized, extremely sort of stereophonic. Your own style was very, very different. Now, you hadn't grown up on global cinema, you hadn't really watched cinema here. Can you help us understand how that aesthetic was created? Was it out of music? Was it out of literature? Or was it just something inborn in you?
I really would love to say it was inborn in me, but it's not true. I think it's also a very generalized term to say that all South Indian films were larger than life. It was not. We've had some real great masters here. And so they've opened up ways, they've done quite a few amazing films, which were very realistic. And the time that I came in was probably a very good time in Tamil because they were very good directors who were making distinct marks. So for people like me who came afterwards, the door was already open, the path was already there. So you just have to find your language into it. And that is only out of what you've been exposed to, what you've read, what you've heard, what you've talked, what you've thought, what you agreed with, what you disagreed with. Those all become a part of your art form. I always felt that what makes you is in terms of aesthetics is what you like very much, what you're passionate about, and what you hate even more. I think those two define where you want to tread.
So a lot of your work is very political, and there's a wonderful mix of the personal strands, the very deeply human stories, but set in some political context. So again, earlier, I don't know if you were here when Shiv Vishwanathan was talking about the middle class sensibility. It's very much the middle road, the conformist, keep your head down, be a good boy, become a MBA, become a cost accountant kind of mentality. So what helped form your politics? Were there any seminal influences in your life as people or again as literature?
No, I was just trying to entertain people. No, but a filmmaker is just like every other person. He is living in a time with people, with things happening around us, and everything that happens that affects people affects a filmmaker also, and in some way it seeps in. So I didn't seek out to make a political film, but at a certain age when some things happen, it gets reflected in your work, and that's a part of any art form. I'm sure it reflects the time, the period, the politics of it, the social situation. So it's integral to your growth.
So, I'll come back to your music and your craft and all of that, but just to follow this strand a little bit more, some of your films, Bombay, Roja, Dil Se, was about terrorism, but the underlying thread in that was nationalism. And because we were discussing that earlier, and it is one of the big issues of our time now, It would be wonderful to understand how you understand nationalism. You know, would you be able to speak of it? What constitutes nationalism for you? What is your idea of India?
That's what's my idea of India. You know, it's such an abstract terms, and so you always wonder, you know, what a border means. You know, what is it that we talk about? If I were, you know, if I was born just across the other side, you know, in China, you know, I'd root only for that. So, you know, somewhere along the line, you realize that it is as human beings, and we group ourselves together more to protect ourselves. You know, must have been over the years that, you know, invariably all groups are out of insecurity and, you know, to safeguard oneself. And if you know that that is the only reason that it is formed for, it is ridiculous to let that affect everything else. You know, let that, you know, become more than what it was supposed to serve. If you're secured enough, you don't need to, you know, carry it beyond that. You know, so I think India as an idea has been changing. It is not a single thing, and it has evolved. Like he was saying, it was wonderful to listen to him. You know, I mean, and even things we say are our culture, our art is, what is it? You know, it has been influenced continuously by every invasion, by every new thought, and there's been like, like we heard about the magic. It has always been an interaction. It has always been a growth that comes out of new ideas that keep infusing. So if we, very, very rigidly restrict ourselves to only this, then we are just shutting doors.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to come to your understanding of Tamil Nadu. You know, in many ways, it seems a kind of citadel of its own, you know, in the larger fabric of India. There's a particular kind of history here. There's a particular kind of political imagination here. There's a particular kind of relationship between cinema and politics over here. Your film Iruvar examined a little bit of that. You know, the great figures of Tamil politics were kind of fictionalized in Iruvar. In all these years of making cinema here, sir, have you understood that particular relationship Tamil Nadu has with cinema? You know, how does it affect the imagination differently, because you worked in many languages? What is peculiar about Tamil Nadu's imagination?
I think, after independence, there was a Dravidian movement that came about, and probably one of the few political movements which was engineered by actors, by artists, by dramatists, by orators. It came not from a group of lawyers, it didn't come from a group of educated people, but came through a set of artists who had conviction, who had beliefs, who had idealism, and it came out of that. And I think it came exactly at the same time cinema was also flourishing. So I think one used the other to gain more, to move forward. And that is why in Tamil Nadu it's kind of totally goes parallel, and several times I've been asked, why is it that in your state there is an actor who's the chief minister? And I ask them, why not? I mean, just because somebody acts, does it disqualify them? Does it make him any different from any other chief minister or prime minister that comes before? No, I think as long as they're capable and they're ready to put their neck on the line and stand there and do this, we are as good or as bad as the next person.
So when you talk about this roots and idealism, the Dravidian movement really was extraordinary. And in Iruvar already you were examining the loss of idealism, the kind of blunting of ideals and of principles that happens in public life. Now, over all these years, so much of that has got mutilated and contorted. Do you feel that there's still enough to be inspirational in Tamil Nadu politics today? Do any of those early ideas still survive? Do you feel hopeful about the politics in the state still?
I'm hoping that, the early ones might die, but the new ones might come up, and we all live with that kind of a hope. We hope the next one has some kind of a conviction. I think what has happened before is that, it's a kind of a decay. It has lived, it's grown, served its purpose, but, it has changed. Other things like power and, individual ambitions kind of have come in the way. But that doesn't mean it is true for a political movement. Doesn't mean there cannot be a newer, fresher political movement that can come forth, and sometimes it just needs one trigger for, things to come out, for it to emerge, and you just needed one station to make the electoral system so much better. So we just need one element to fall into place, and hopefully it will.
So I'm going to come back to your making films in Hindi and Tamil and explore that a little bit. But let's speak about the music in your films, Mani sir. It's again one of those really almost like a watershed. The way you have used music in cinema, both in your partnerships with Ilayaraja and with Rahman, have completely transformed the musical landscape. Would you talk a little bit about these partnerships? How have they infected you with a certain aesthetic? How did you do it? Pick some moments or some songs from your films where particular magic kicked in.
I think I've been lucky. I think Tamil cinema has been lucky. Tamil, speaking people have been lucky because they've been given over 50 years. The amount of great music that has come out of the composers here is just fantastic. And I think when I've worked with Ilayaraja or with Rahman, they're completely opposites, but they're both geniuses. They're so fantastic that they elevate the film, they elevate the idea, and they're so, open to work with. And in these collaborations, I just sit on the other side and they make the music. That's the best part about being a director. You don't have to do anything. The actor acts, the cinematographer shoots, the music director composes, and you just say, yeah, that's nice, that's not nice. No, that's all.
No, but just to give us a little more sort of experiential, give us a ringside view into, let's start with Rahman. Will you pick some songs where, just help us understand how that partnership works? You seed him with an idea, what does he do? Just help us understand one song or two songs where that kind of creativity kicked in, how that process works.
No, I can only tell you the difference, with Ilayaraja, when you work, he's so clear, slow, meticulous. So when you have a concept for a film or for a song, you tell it in its entirety. This is the way I see it. This is what I'm planning to shoot. This is the interlude that I'm planning to shoot. If you don't do that, then if you leave that 5-minute gap, you would have finished the song. So you have to be there and be present and tell what you want to do. Then he incorporates it into his music. With Rahman, it's right the opposite. You don't have to tell him the situation. You can just tell him the story. You can tell him the mood that you're trying to play, and he works on it, and then identify something, and then I can place it into the script. So it is two different kind of working styles that you adopt. And there's no fixed way in which there are some songs, for example, Tu Hi Re in Bombay. It took us quite a long time to, come up with the concept and for a tune for that. And few others, like the theme for Bombay, which was very, very integral for the film, fell in place in no time. When I had a shooting, for which I needed some, a song like Hamma Amma to be ready for shoot. And I went to his studio that evening and he says that I've got it for you, and he played me the theme instead, So it also depends on, something coming in its own organic way instead of it being done for a schedule.
So what about that iconic song on the train? I was reading somewhere that in your original script, it was just a one line. It just said song on a train. Why did you think of a song on a train? And then how did it blossom into something so fantastic?
I think in the script, all songs are only one line. Song. That's how it works. But you have it in mind, or you think of an idea, and then you narrate it. Originally, Dil Se had based on the 50th year of independence, and there were celebrations all around, and except pockets of the border states having a lot of problems. So we had this person from All India Radio, kind of representing everybody's voice, who's traveling around the nation. So this travel was a integral part of the film, that he gets an idea of the entire thing. So when I first thought, the song was meant to be on a boat, and that he would travel, and that it would be like a Bengal boat song, kind of what I started off with. But when we sat down, realized that I wanted a rhythm which would be, which would have the upbeat and things like that. So we just thought that we could, think of a train, and and visually it's such a exciting, such a vibrant image. So that's how it became.
So, help us understand what kinds of stories attracts you, because you've got such a massive canvas of work, from Yuva to a kind of fictionalized version of Guru, of Mr. Dhirubhai Ambani, to the other characters in your Tamil canvas. What kind of characters draw you? What sparks your brain? What kind of people are you drawn to?
I think, I'm not able to classify and say this is the kind of people that I can deal with. Whatever fascinates you or whatever scares you, whatever you, are disturbed by, all of them can become films potential. And there will be several things that are happening. For example, the conflict in Sri Lanka has been happening in the backyard for so many years, and it's there in your conscience. You're there seeing it every day. But till you find a vehicle through which you can place a story in that background, you're just like everybody else. And when there is an opening that comes, then it converts itself into a film. So it is not a rigid thing. You're open. Only thing I'm trying to be rigid with is that it should be different from the previous film that you have done. Hopefully, that keeps you alive.
So, when you did that film on Ambani, what did you come away with? He's such an interesting figure in India's sort of public landscape now. Many people see him as the first robber baron. Others would admire that entrepreneurship. Many see him as the epitome of political corruption. So he's a very interesting character. Now, having delved into him and his psyche to be able to make that film, what was your own understanding of him and his place in India's landscape?
No, my understanding was not really only of him. I thought that is what we are all becoming. We started after independence, very, very strongly to the left of center. And gradually we moved substantially to the right of center. It is something that is happening across each one of us. And we have, in our lives, we have seen that, transition that's come. So the film was only, not just looking at a character, but looking at us, that we moved this passage over these many years, So that is what attracted me, and that is what I see. It's not a judgment. It is not a, pick rights and wrongs. It is what we are. I think what is there in the film or what is there in that person is there in a fashion in all of us. All of us have moved. All of us have conveniently taken positions which are easy now and which pushes ourselves forward. So it is to a large extent reflection of the times that we are living in.
I believe that the Ambanis asked to see the film, and they were very interested to see your reading of what Mr. Dhirubhai Ambani's character was portrayed as. Did they have any interaction with you? Did they see the film and discuss it with you?
Not at all. I think I don't even know if they've seen it. So there's absolutely no interaction. They have not in any way, in any fashion, tried to come in.
So I had left that conversation earlier parked. When I was talking about inhabiting different languages, you've not only shot in different languages, but sometimes you've done the same film in both languages. Yuva, you did it in Tamil as well as in Hindi, back to back. How different is that experience? Does a story change when you do it in different languages? Do characters change? And what's your own creative response to doing the same story twice? Do you get bored halfway doing that?
It's a mistake that you shouldn't be doing too often. It just tough to get a film right in one, and to do it all over again is just a bit of a torture. And and it was a mistake I've learned, and I don't think I'll do it again. There are easier methods of dubbing it and releasing it, and or subtitling it and releasing. So it's kind of, I think, I've started making films without knowing how to make it. I've jumped into it and tried to figure a way out for myself and then made it. So, and till now it remains the same. When I start a film, it's almost like a first film. I go not knowing how I'm going to do it and then find a way. For me, that becomes the journey. That becomes what pushes me into making films. But when you've done it once before and you're trying to do it again, then that magic goes away. So it's a bit of a downer.
So the earlier part of the question was about language. Does your sensibility become different when you're shooting in Tamil, when you're shooting in Kannada, when you're shooting in Hindi? And help us understand how it's different.
No, it is different because it's set in different backgrounds. And even within the same language, if it is set in a city like Madras, it'd be different. Whereas if it's set in a town like Trichy or Coimbatore, it'll be different. It's a world that you're creating or you're placing your characters in, and that world has to be true. It has to ring true. The background, the atmosphere has to ring true if your characters are to be believed and if the story has to become plausible. So it will differ. It will 100% differ. And doing a film in a language that you're not familiar with, for example, for me in Hindi, I've grown up in this Dravidian movement, so my Hindi is pathetic. And
deliberately so.
possibly, it's a mental block, I think. So when you're doing it in a language that you don't know, I've learned that it liberates you in the sense that you trust the actor a little more. If it was a Tamil, I would have had more corrections, more directions to how something can be placed. Here, I work with them on the feel of the thing and the emotion of that, and then make them a part of the decision whether they felt right, doing this take or was the previous take was correct. So to an extent, it liberates me. It makes me take a little bit of that actor and bring him to my chair and make sure that he's a part of the entire process.
But so what was your temptation to shoot in another language in the first place? See, when you're a staunch Dravidian, why were you getting into the Hindi landscape?
No, it's not that I'm a strong Dravidian, just that my language skills are very limited. I've made films in Tamil where the stories have been based outside Tamil Nadu. These are stories, Bombay or Roja were placed because the stories took place there. And when you do that, if I have to communicate, people around should speak a language of Tamil. So when you make a film on Kashmir terrorist, and it's in Tamil, so I have to say that the chief of the terrorist leader studied in Coimbatore. How many times can I say the same lie?
Yeah, right. So, earlier I was asking you about the fact that the sensibilities are different when you choose different subjects, that your politics in that come through as well. Earlier we were talking about the university. When you made the film Yuva, it was about student politics, and it's really one of the biggest issues in our country today. The way student protests are happening, the state of our universities. What was your own take on that? What do you feel about the importance of student politics and where we are at today in our country?
I think Yuva actually started off by close to a character from Osmania University called George Reddy. He was, I've met a lot of people who have interacted and this is about 20, 25 years back. And he was murdered in the hostel, in the campus. But he was a leader, and he was brilliant in his academics, and they think that he would have been somebody special if he had lived. So, that was so inspirational that, our most important formative years are that, I feel, when you're getting exposed to ideas and your own ideas are forming, And the university gives you the platform to, be able to become what you become later. And be politically aware at that point of time is very important, and it is probably the springboard for everybody who's come out and made a name or made a change with politics. So so Yuva came out of that, the fact that, and that generation from that point of view needs to take a step into the decision making into tomorrow and not just sit back and say that it's got nothing to do with me, I'll go about my way.
So, okay, just one or two last questions, but just to give us some personal insight into you, Mani sir, that you are, as I understand it, an atheist. You couldn't have grown up in the Dravidian movement without being an atheist or a skeptic at the very least. So when you have really difficult moments in your life, any sort of really dark moments or crises of confidence, what do you reach for? What are your philosophical sources of strength?
Self.
Self.
Yeah. No, I'm there by choice. My family was a very religious family, so I became an atheist not because of Dravidian movement, but because of my family.
In contrary to them.
Yeah, it was as much a rebellion or whatever it is, but it was my decision to believe. It was a rational thought which I questioned myself. Do you think this is true? Do you think this makes sense? Do you think you have a logic to accept that and follow what they're doing? And when I decided I didn't have it, it's not an issue or a statement that I'm making, but it's what I wanted to be, what I thought, and I wanted to be honest to that. So that's what I am. And having been that way, I don't think no one promised you life will be without trouble. No one promised you there will not be dark patches. There is going to be. And if you learn to accept, you have no choice, but anyway you have to accept it. So you turn to cope with it more than anything else. And that you can, I realize that people who believe, I understand that very well and appreciate it. And I think it's very wonderful to be able to, do that. But when you don't believe in it, then you have to rely on yourself and your strength.
So, I know we've run out of time, but what will be fascinating to understand is how, on the matter of faith, Rahman's creativity is so driven by his idea of faith. He often feels that he's almost channeling his Sufi peer's sort of imagination through him, or that he's accessing something higher than himself through his faith. How does that work? Have you all ever spoken about it? Have you got an insight into how faith and creativity can affect each other? Do you ever talk about it?
I don't think it's just with Rahman. Ilayaraja is a very, very, person who's very devoted, very philosophical. And I don't also think that it is only with these two. I think, for the entire art movement, if you look at anything, whether you look at music, if you look at paintings, if you look at, all of them have been driven so dramatically by the religious beliefs. That abstraction lets you fly away from logic and fly away from rationality and be able to produce. So I've never understood this, but I found that if you look at, any of the classical forms, it's all somewhere related to this belief in something which is not. The best poetries in Tamil have all been, on bhakti movements. So it fascinates me that it does that to art. So I'm not surprised when Ilayaraja or Rahman has that, inspiring and producing, what they produce.
So what do you think about T.M. Krishna and his attempt to, kind of break some of the conservative boundaries around Carnatic music? And this is a conversation we've had with him at Algebra, where I've asked him the same thing, that when faith can drive a kind of sublime idea of creativity, why would you, it's different if you want to open up spaces, but does it make sense to take away the inspiration behind a particular art form? So what do you feel about, what he's trying to do with Carnatic music and how he's trying to open up the conversation around it?
Well, I think every, boundaries that we draw ourselves can be pushed open. It is what we have drawn and we have put around ourselves. Why be bound by that? Why be, lock yourself inside something? There's a fresh mind, there's a mind which opens out. It doesn't change the music that he's making. It doesn't change, the music others are making. He's not saying that you shouldn't do these music. He just wants to have a freedom to express it the way he wants to. So I think it's fantastic. I think that's the way it grows. I'm sure, he'll make an impact on what he's doing.
So just to end on one question, which I'm sure a lot of people would be interested in, and others who might watch this online, which of the Hindi film directors that are currently making films, whose work do you like?
There are too many people. There's amazing amount of talent that is coming through, and there are newer filmmakers, and
Are there any films that have caught your attention recently? I'm not asking you to rate it or anything, just something that's caught your eye recently.
Yeah, whatever Anurag does is very, very impressive, and quite a few. The Mashan was brilliant, and I've not seen a few because I'm waiting for the subtitles to come. So sometimes I have to wait long. So, or we have to go here on a Thursday when they'll put the subtitles.
Thank you very, very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for agreeing and for giving us this insight.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.